Hello and welcome to the Friday Total Soccer Show. I am Daryl Grove and I'm joined by a man who's waking up very early on Saturday. It's Taylor Rockwell. Hello.
Hello, buddy. I feel the need to clarify that waking up early, not as early as people on the West Coast.
Yes.
We always hear about that when we talk about waking up early for the Premier League.
So it's Manchester Derby,
Yep.
12:30 British time, 7:30 Eastern time, 4:30 Pacific time.
Sorry, guys. Set your coffee alarms.
Set the DVRs.
Yeah.
So, and I've got to be honest, I think that's what I'm going to do.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah,
I've worked hard this week, and I think my Saturday I need to sleep in.
You don't want to reward yourself with the beauty that is the Manchester Derby?
I'll be tempted. I'll tell you what, if I do just happen, sometimes you just accidentally wake up early, I'll get up and watch, but I'm not going to set an alarm, I don't think.
You might miss an event.
Expectations
are that it's going to be the most watched soccer game in English football history.
Is that right? Mm-hmm. People are hyped. Oh, maybe I will.
Yep.
Okay, you're starting to convince me. All right, why is this one more exciting than usual? Let's start with that.
Well, they're these coaches, and they're kind of famous. That's the big kind of narrative that I've heard.
Mourinho versus
Guardiola. It goes back to their days at Barcelona together. It goes back to their rivalry between Barcelona and Madrid. You can make the argument it goes back even further to the Chelsea Barcelona game when there's a lot of controversy in that game. There's some bad blood. There's some eye poking. There's some criticism.
Drogba, it's a disgrace game.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. So there's lots of different reasons why they've kind of come into conflict. They've both downplayed that a little bit this season.
Drogba supporting Manchester United on Saturday?
That would be weird, but possibly.
Drogba is East Coast. Yeah, he's got time to get up.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. So I think, so they've both tried to downplay it a bit coming into this game because I think they're trying to focus on not themselves. But we'll see how that finishes and how this game finishes.
And we'll talk about Mourinho and Guardiola as part of our preview, but I'd like to keep it more tactical than personal, if that's fair.
Yeah.
Because, I don't know, I feel like you can read about that elsewhere, and to me it's the least interesting part of the game.
I think it's
because no one can win the personal battle.
No, it's the least interesting, but I would say easiest to write about because you can write about the timeline and then you can kind of build up the rivalry from that point. And I think it is important if you're not so familiar with the two teams and their histories, then you can kind of get into it from this perspective because I think it's more heated than it's ever been now, that rivalry, and it's more important. I mean, it's the most expensive game, I think, ever. It's $600 million between the two squads.
Right.
It's a decent amount of money.
That's going to keep being the case as teams spend more and more money.
Right, true. Yeah.
It's also two teams that have made great starts to the season, right? I think, aren't they the top two teams in England right now? Are they unbeaten?
I think Man City's top, United is second.
On goal difference?
Yes.
They've won all their games, right? So this is it. Someone's record has to fall. That makes it exciting as well, right? It's at Old Trafford, and we said 7:30 Saturday morning.
Yep.
We've got specific predictions, which we agonised over. We'll get to those maybe at the end.
Sure.
I want to talk about the shape of this game.
Sure.
It's about competing philosophies between coaches. It's Pep Guardiola's possession versus Jose Mourinho's pragmatism.
Yep, that's the word I was going to use.
Which is the sort of nice description of sometimes counter-attacking and defensive.
Yeah, and I think that's what it will be in this game.
Do you?
Yes.
Because I think I agree with you, but I also have this feeling that Mourinho at Manchester United may be a different Mourinho.
Yeah, but I think that's to say that what you're talking about, sitting back and then countering, is like anti-football or it's a bad thing. Like, no, I think it's the practical approach. That's why he's pragmatic. It's because he looks at his opponent and says, this is what they're going to try to do, so I want to try to neutralize that. Okay. I don't think he's the type of coach who wants to go out there and out-tactic, out-manage, out-strategy them. I think it's much more simple. Let's play the game that we want to play. Let's have a really, really organized defense and drill. What do you mean?
As out-strategizing?
Well, in the sense of like not doing the Guardiola where everyone's going to man mark for half and we'll see where it gets us.
So nothing like wacky. There's not going to be some crazy Mourinho system that's too different to what he usually does. So. Okay, so here's my question. What he has been doing the first three games of the season, obviously a four-man backline, then a two-man central defensive midfield of Marouane Fellaini and Paul Pogba. And then Rooney ahead of them and Ibrahimovic ahead of them and then Mata and Martial on the wings, right?
Right.
That works against, say, Hull, right? But does a central defensive midfield of Paul Pogba and Marouane Fellaini, does that work against a really good team like Manchester City? Because his normal defensive midfielders are like people like Matic or Makelele, you know what I mean? Like real dedicated defensive midfielders.
So the two things that will be interesting to see and will give you insight into what Mourinho's doing, I would say, is if Marcus Rashford starts, That will tell you one thing.
Okay.
And if Fellaini starts, we'll tell you the other.
Can we talk about Fellaini first then?
Sure. Because if Fellaini starts, it means I think that he is taking a slightly pragmatic approach, maybe not the most one, because having a natural defensive midfielder like, say, Morgan Schneiderlin would be the one that's like, you've got this guy who's going to do defensive work, tackle people, lock it down.
Our friend Pav, I was talking to him last night, Wednesday night, he thinks it should be Schneiderlin to start.
Yeah, I mean, because he's probably a little bit more sound defensively, but not from an attacking standpoint. The other aspect of it, though, is that City are short. That's really the best way to put it.
Short height-wise?
They have only 2 players who are above 6 feet tall. Outfield players, excuse me. Yeah, right. Just their 2 center backs. United have 5. So if you look at it from that standpoint, and then City have, I think, 5 players. I have it written down. Yes, 5 players who are 5'9" or under.
Okay.
So then you have Fellaini in there who's big. Not to say that Schneiderlin is short, but Fellaini's big, Pogba is big, Zlatan is big.
All right, but that's one thing if you're playing a team that puts the ball in the air. Surely,
no,
Man
but I'm
City
saying, but if
don't
you
put the ball in the air.
But if you want to be United and hit on the break or try to hit off of a set piece and then hunker down, then it becomes less about like we need this one guy to be the linchpin of the defense because otherwise they're going to stream through. But if you're more like everyone's going to be back behind the ball, and then when we have a set piece opportunity, we send our 5 huge guys forward, we snatch a goal there, then the Fellaini start makes more sense.
All right. So if he does start, it's one of the most interesting things in the game because it's the true test of Fellaini as a big-time defensive midfielder under Mourinho.
Yep.
If we end up seeing like Nolito and Sterling and De Bruyne like pinging passes around Fellaini, you just see like him spinning in circles. We'll be like, oh, maybe this doesn't work.
Yep. And I think this is the curse of being a fan when it comes to these types of games, is that I can see things working really well and United getting the win convincingly. I can also see City destroying United and United finishing with like 9 men.
Because the flip side of that defensive midfield partnership is Paul Pogba has been free to roam a little bit more because Fellaini is set. If United do have this like more structured, we're going to sit a little deep and then counter-attack, that means Paul Pogba has to rein it back a bit. And we don't know if he's willing to do that. I feel like he is, but I've not actually seen evidence of it, right?
Yeah.
He's more of a rangy, get around the field kind of guy.
I mean, I don't know. I do wonder if maybe because he was with United at a relatively early age and kind of therefore knows the importance of the derby a bit more, if he's more inclined to say, like, yeah, we want to win this one. We want the City to be red, so I'll do more defensive work than I might otherwise do. Then maybe another player coming in who's just an expensive player who it's like, yeah, it's a big game, but it's not something that they have that full familiarity with.
Okay.
So with that in mind, I think that will tell you if United are being defensive. And then what I was talking about with Rashford is there is some speculation that United will play him because he has that pace.
Yeah.
And because if City are playing high and trying to possess, then you can exploit better on the counterattack.
So who would Rashford start in place of?
I think basically either another one of the midfielders. So maybe more of like a 4-2-2-2 is some of the speculation.
What?
Like 2 defensive midfielders, 2 wide players, 2 attacking players up top, with Rashford maybe roaming around a bit more.
So where is he? Is he a wide player in that?
No, he's one of the 2 attacking. He's one of the 2 front men.
So he replaces Rooney or Ibrahimovic?
Probably.
That's not going to happen though, right?
Nope.
Both of those guys are going to start.
Exactly. So it's really, I mean, that's basically the speculation is, I think that's rooted in the fact that he scored 3 goals. So he...
For the under-21?
Yes, so then he has to start, and no, he doesn't, is my response to that. So that's what I think United will do. What do you think City will do?
The big news, obviously, for City, Sergio Aguero suspended for being a bit too elbowy.
Being a bit too... I think that was the official charge, yeah.
So Sergio Aguero is suspended for using his elbows. City don't really have a second-choice striker unless it's Iheanacho.
Right.
Which I guess is a second-choice striker, but and even though he's done well when he's played, you still don't think of him as one of those big, expensive City players. Is that unfair?
Well, no, it's not unfair to think that, but I think it's unfair on Iheanacho. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Like, I think you're not wrong for thinking that, but it is definitely unfair at the same time because he has proven more than capable. It's just that
Am I Walter Sobchak in this situation?
Yes. You're not wrong. You're just ... But, like, okay, so there's that drop-off from Aguero to Iheanacho.
Yeah.
But say if City started Nolito and Sterling out wide, then like they could also play David Silva there. They could play Kevin De Bruyne there, Jesus Navas. I mean, Leroy Sané. Like so, you see, there's not that much of a drop off there. So it's understandable to think, well, surely they've got another big name striker up there as well.
But what I got this weird feeling is going to happen is Guardiola can use this as an excuse almost to play more of a false nine type situation, because Aguero is better when he's got space to run at, right?
Yeah.
And if City are going to be like trying to possess, and Mourinho does do something kind of structured and defensive, but to hit on the counter, I feel like I hate to use the word, but false nine, like a striker who's not really a striker, might be what they do. And it could be, you listed all those attacking midfielders they have. Maybe one of those guys comes central. Maybe Raheem Sterling plays as a striker.
I think that's the smarter thing for them to do, because for what you mentioned with Marouane Fellaini, where he's not naturally a defensive midfielder, even though he says that's what he's always wanted to play. You have that. You have Eric Bailly, who statistically has been a very good performer for United, but we've also seen him be a little bit rash in some challenges. So I think you could see that. You've got maybe Chris Smalling starting, despite the fact that he's been injured. So then you might have Daley Blind, who's not a natural center back. So for those reasons, you could see some problems for United, some fouls occurring, some free kicks being given away if you have that kind of false nine, quickness, pacey players, interchanging positions. That could lead to problems.
That's what I'm thinking more of, is just the need to create space and break down a defence is maybe helped by having guys who move around. So there's not just one guy playing centre forward, there's lots of guys switching around.
Right.
So maybe, if anything, it would just be all those attacking midfielders they have, they get to get one extra on the field, right, and move them around. The big test, I guess, for me, so we're saying, like, if you look at Fellaini, we'll see Fellaini and Pogba how they perform as proper central defensive midfielders in this game. The test for me in this game for Man City is Pep Guardiola and his weird fullback thing that he's been doing at City. It's been really pronounced, right? You've seen Sagna and Kolarov, or Clichy and Zabaleta shift from fullback and come and almost join Fernando as a central midfielder, which I know is a thing he started doing with Lahm and Alaba at Bayern. And I'm still not fully convinced it's a good idea, because Lahm and Alaba are very, very special players, whereas Zabaleta and Kolarov and Clichy and Sagna are just very, very good players.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And I don't think that necessarily is, like, it could work against West Ham and Stoke. It may not work against Manchester United.
Yeah.
It might just be that you leave massive gaps and Anthony Martial runs into those gaps.
That's absolutely a possibility. And that's why I think this game is so captivating. And this is why I'm glad that we have stayed away from kind of the off-field drama.
Yeah.
Because there's so much that could also happen. For example, I think Mourinho will be pragmatic, but in his, I think the last game he managed that Madrid at least won against Barcelona, they pressed from the outset, and that's the one where they scored inside the first minute. And so you could also see that, like, United just come out and press City right away and try to take advantage of him trying to do new things with City and playing players, like, making them do things that maybe they're not quite as comfortable with.
Yeah.
Because it's still early in the season. So you could see that as well.
All right, if you could guarantee that that's what's going to happen, I would set my alarm for like 6:55 and make sure to drink like 2 cups of coffee before kickoff, because that's a much more exciting game than a well-organised Mourinho back four and central defensive midfielders and wingers sitting back trying to like square up to a Guardiola possession team.
Yeah, I think you can go ahead and set your DVR. That's how I respond to that. Because it's early in the season, I think both managers would happily have this game finish 0-0.
Right.
That's my
There's
feeling.
a chance this happens, right?
Because it's early in the season. They're both top of the table. You are happier to walk away with a 1-1 draw or with 1 point each than lose points, fall back in the table, have that criticism.
Yeah.
It becomes a problem.
Okay, so what are our specific predictions for this game?
I've got a good one and I've got a bad one, or positive and a negative for Man United.
Okay, give me your Manchester United ones.
I'll go positive is Zlatan Ibrahimovic scores, because we've avoided the off-field drama conversations, but there's been many articles who have said it way better than I can summarize here about how little Zlatan cares for Pep Guardiola. And I would say going the opposite way, does not like him, and I think is motivated by a desire to show people who he perceives as having wronged him.
So extra motivation for Zlatan results in a Zlatan goal.
So I'm going to say he scores,
okay.
Yes. By the same token, as I said, you've seen Eric Bailly be a little bit overly aggressive at times in preseason and in regular season, and so I'm going to say the negative specific prediction is that he gets a red card in this game.
With maybe like a tricky City player, like Raheem Sterling seems to have a penchant for drawing penalty kicks, right? Yeah. Maybe Bailly takes down Sterling.
Yeah, could be that. Could also be, we know that referees are being a lot more strict when it comes to jersey pulling and also in response to dissent, and Eric Bailly loves an eye roll. So it could be your first yellow card for an eye roll we've seen. So, and then, accumulation yellow cards equals red card.
All right. Speaking of Manchester City, it just occurred to me we didn't mention Gundogan could be back. Right, we're reading reports that Gundogan and Sané, who are not fit to start the season, are now healthy and could make their debuts in this game.
Right.
That is both a boost for Man City in terms of like talent on the field, but it's also new players who haven't played a first-team game. And I'm not sure if that's a good thing or a bad thing. If you're City, you know what I'm saying?
I mean, it's the player that he pretty clearly most wanted in the offseason. Yeah, and so I wouldn't be surprised if he gets some minutes here. I don't think he'll start, but I think
it'd be strange if he did, but also, again, exciting.
Yes.
Right? Mm-hmm. The guy I'm going to focus... Sorry, you can say something else?
No, go ahead. And then I have one more point I think I'm legally obligated to make about this game. But you go first.
The one guy I do want to make a prediction about is Nolito. Mm-hmm. Again, a guy Guardiola went after. A guy who has scored 3 times and assisted twice so far for Manchester City this season.
It's decent.
I want to say, if the game goes as expected, with United being very sort of defensive to counter, as City try to break them down, the most important thing will be the guys who can sort of find and exploit space. And I think Nolito is very, very good at that. We saw that in the Euros when they tried to break down Czech Republic and eventually did it. I think Piqué scored. I looked it up before we recorded. I think it's Piqué scored. So if City score, it'll be Nolito with a goal or an assist because he'll be the one to find some space.
All right, okay. So a Nolito goal or assist. I like it. So predictions done. The other point, and I think maybe this is indicative of where this game is going, that I haven't mentioned Wayne Rooney in my entire Manchester United preview, which I think most...
You half suggested that maybe Rashford would start instead of Rooney.
Well, that's what some people have suggested. I don't think he will because, I mean, Wayne Rooney scored 11 goals against Man City. Like, it's kind of what he does, but... Really, neither system benefits him that much because if you do the high press, I don't know if he can handle that. If you do sit back and do the break, I don't know if he can do that either.
I think he can. I have much more faith in Wayne Rooney than I think anyone else.
What do you mean by faith?
I think he can press. I think he can sit. I think he can do both.
I'm thinking more. I'm not saying like his mental ability to understand the game plan. I mean his physical ability to sprint for 90 minutes. I don't know if he can do that as well as he used to be able to do.
I see.
I think he lacks some of that explosive pace that he once had. So it'll be very curious to see how he's deployed in this game and how he's utilized within the tactics that Jose Mourinho opts for.
Okay, so that game again, the Manchester derby, United versus City at Old Trafford, is 7:30 Eastern in the United States.
Boy.
We will, of course, be reviewing this game after the weekend.
We sure will.
We've also got some other games to look forward to. We asked listeners to tweet us what they're watching this weekend. We will go through all of those very soon. But first, Taylor, we have a sponsor on today's show, and that sponsor is Fuji Rebounders.
Yes,
Thank you to Fuji for sponsoring the show. An interesting thing happened, again, on Twitter. You had a question, or we had a question from Kim asking, what's the difference between a Fuji rebounder and a regular rebounder? Now, me not growing up in the United States, I didn't really know what a regular rebounder was, but you gave a good answer. So I thought it'd be good to share that with our listeners as we let people know about Fuji Rebounders.
Sure. Well, I think a regular rebounder from the ones that I use, they tend to be smaller. You can't have like the full-size goal rebounder, but that's pretty expensive and pretty cumbersome. So a lot of times it tends to be a smaller rebounder that you can kind of use to kick against. It's the basic thing. You work on passing, on shooting.
Am I picturing the right thing? It looks like a little box.
Yeah, like a rectangle. It can be a rectangle. It can be like a double row of rectangles, so you have to work on like hitting it high and hitting it low and all those different things. I'd say the main difference with Fuji is, number one, that Fuji's set up to be a game. So it's set up so that you can play it competitively against one person or 5 people or however you want to do it. But because of that, it's set up to help you really work on your touch and to help you work on your touch in a variety of ways.
Yeah.
So it incentivizes a bouncing ball, learning how to handle that, learning how to incorporate juggling, incorporate touch more so than just kind of rocket a pass against it and then try to settle that pass coming right back at you.
And I can say from my experience playing Fuji that you get the experience of doing it under pressure, right? Because if I don't get to that ball and return it, I lose the point to my bearded co-host. Whereas I think if you play with a rebounder on your own, there's no pressure, right? You just play against it and it bounces back. If you miss, you just start again.
And also, I think with the bouncing back point, it gets to the Fuji idea that it's like the engineered rebounder because it's really tough to know what the ball is going to do. Like you can kind of learn a little bit that like if you hit it low, it bounces high. But even then, it's really tough, as you and I have found on multiple occasions, to anticipate the spin on the ball and how that's going to affect the trajectory and where it's going to land. So it also keeps you on your toes because we're coaching a team. We've both seen that so many people would love to just warm up by going in front of the goal and shooting it. And it's like, that's all you have to do is just you take a touch. You don't really shoot it under pace or with any sort of in-game situation. I think Fuji sets you up much more so for in-game situations where you kind of don't know the chaos of the ball as it comes in and you have to react to it.
So there you go. That is the difference between a Fuji rebounder and a regular rebounder.
Yep.
part of the sponsorship with Fuji is that we have the best discount code for Fuji. We do. If you go to www.playfuchi.com, playfutchi.com. Use the coupon at checkout, Total Soccer Bonus, lowercase or one word, $70 off. That is the biggest discount on a Fuji Rebounder in the whole world.
That's impressive. That's impressive. It's impressive your spelling is getting better, too. I like that it's now a tradition. It's a running theme in each show that you have to spell something before we can progress to the end.
Remember we used to do spelling contests on the show back in the day?
I do, because it's how I know how to spell Nicholas Bentner properly nowadays.
It's how I almost learned to spell Cuauhtémoc Blanco.
Ooh, still don't know that one. Still don't know that one.
You did one show when you quizzed me on it.
Really?
Well, you had it printed out in front of you. It's very different.
Okay.
All right, other things that people are watching this week. We put the call out on Twitter, Taylor, and many, many people responded to let us know what they were watching this weekend. Or as I said earlier that we'd list all of them, there is no time to do that. But we've selected a few to get a good sampling of what people are watching.
Still quite a few.
This weekend. First on my piece of paper here, Soccer Brothers from the Soccer Bros pod. They're watching Hamburg versus Leverkusen to watch Bobby Wood.
Mm-hmm.
CJ, I would add you can also watch Alan Halilovic maybe in that game for Hamburg.
Good point.
Yeah.
CJ Francis says she's watching Seattle versus Washington in the NWSL because Lynch has made an already compelling game a must-see. It's on 9/11 as well, so we will see what happens with Anthem Gate.
So this is like, it's not a two-legged thing, right? But it's sort of the return, the NWSL return leg of Spirit versus Seattle, which was somewhat controversial recently.
Yeah, Danielle on Twitter says the same. She says she's a diehard Spirit fan, but also the LA Galaxy because she's a Galaxy girl. New York Red Bulls versus DC United because she's a DC United fan.
And don't read the last bit.
And then has some choice words about the Red Bulls.
Don't read the last bit. Max Powers is watching LA versus Orlando because legend. Capital L, capital D. We still don't know. At time of recording, we don't know if Landon Donovan will play in that game. But it is LA versus Orlando this weekend. There's a chance he might play in that game. Lots of other people watching that game too.
This is true. Kyle says he's watching DC because I have playoff fever and also rivalries.
See a doctor. Tom Brinkoff, we know him by another name, but Tom Brinkoff says he's watching the Old Firm derby. He's also watching the Manchester derby to see the star managers duel, and he's watching Arsenal versus Sunderland because he's Arsenal till he dies. Quick correction, it's Arsenal versus Southampton, not Sunderland, Southampton. Follow-up tweet, he's watching Rasenball Leipzig versus Dortmund to see a corporate-funded team take its first Bundesliga loss.
I'm excited for that game. That's another one I would definitely want to watch.
Possible Pulisic sighting?
Possible Terrence Boyd bench sighting?
Maybe.
Dave Wilser says he's watching Stoke, which is his team because of Jeff Cameron versus Spurs. Quakes versus Sounders because he's a Quakes season ticket holder and he loves him some $12 beers.
They're expensive at Aviva Stadium?
They're expensive everywhere, but $12, I hope they're at least big. I hope that's not like a can of Bud Light.
Keith Boyer is watching, again, Dortmund versus Leipzig, Everton v Sunderland, and the Manchester derby. The first two are teams I support. The derby is just interesting.
Robert, that's Robert C25 from our Rabble days, is going to be watching Rangers v Celtic. The Old Firm derby is back in the top flight again, and it's on FS1.
Ooh, I might set the DVR for that too. Ed Ritter is watching Red Bulls versus DC, the US Old Firm derby. That's not quite true, but it could be a good game.
Yes. Matt Partridge says Chelsea v Swansea because of the return of the geezer. That'd be David Luiz. And more importantly, his beautiful, flowing, Sideshow Bob-esque hair.
And last but by no means least, Stefan Hernandez is watching West Ham versus Watford, the return of Payet and Lanzini, plus the debut of Zaza. I'm guessing that means he's a West Ham fan and not a Watford fan.
Yes, or a big fan of former Juventus players. One or the other. One or the other.
Final thing on today's show, Taylor, the Total Soccer Show Scouting Network.
Yep.
This thing is getting big. We are getting more reports than we've ever received. I really feel like we've got our own news service. Like they come in over the wire and we get to see what all these talented young players are up to. It's worth remembering as well, the scouts, the people who are watching these players for us, are also supporting the show. It's part of the reason we're able to do 5 shows a week.
Yes, sir. And up first, we've got a scouting report from Ryan Marzak, scouting Pion Sisto. Sisto, who plays for his adopted home country of Denmark, moved to Celta Vigo this summer and may play against against Atletico Madrid on Saturday.
We shall see. Jared Holmgren is scouting Ruben Loftus-Cheek. Jared says that England under-21s defeated Norway 5-1 on Tuesday with Marcus Rashford netting a hat-trick. I know, because I watched all 3 of those goals. Second one is amazing. But Loftus-Cheek scored as well.
Yes.
I didn't know that.
Yes.
I didn't know that.
I think it might have been overshadowed just a little bit.
Well done, RLC.
Yep, Douglas Chan scouting Matt Miazga. According to reports, Matt Miazga was on his way to signing a season-long loan to play for Espanyol in Catalunya in La Liga, but the paperwork was not completed on time. Douglas speculates regarding fax machines, so Chelsea sent him to the Netherlands instead.
Let me guess, Vitesse Arnhem?
Yes. We've talked about that one. I think we talked about that move already with less than glowing aspects behind it.
Okay, but at least he gets to play, right? If you'd have said, if you'd have learned, like, a year ago, Matt Miazga is leaving New York Red Bulls. He's going to go and play for Vitesse Arnhem in the Eredivisie top flight.
I would legitimately say, wait, did he sign for Chelsea?
Okay. If you heard he was leaving Chelsea to sign for an Eredivisie team, you'd say, yeah, that's good, right? Michael Bradley went to Heerenveen and did well there.
I don't know the answer, to be perfectly honest with you.
I think Eredivisie is a great place to develop as a young player.
Yeah, I suppose so. It's just
right?
it's not
the Chelsea loan thing.
It's not known for the strongest of defenses. Is the thing. It's known as a great place to go develop to be a good attacker.
Maybe Miazga can help out then. He could raise the overall standard of defending in the Eredivisie. I'm very optimistic.
Well, speaking of attackers, we've got one to report on.
Kirsten Mladinia is scouting Breel Embolo. Hi, Kirsten. Embolo started for Switzerland in their World Cup qualifier against Portugal and snagged the opening goal in what turned out to be a 2-0 win for the Swiss. Schalke have a big game against Bayern this weekend. It's actually Friday, right? Friday, the 2:30 Eastern kickoff, Schalke v Bayern. Hopefully you'll hear the show before that game kicks off. But Kirsten says she'd be surprised if Breel got a lot of minutes in that game since he played the full 90 for Switzerland. We shall see.
Final report comes from Gillian Avalon, who's scouting Jack Storer. Gillian says, quote, "My grieving is over. The headbutt was stupid. In Jack's defense, he took to Twitter with effusive apologies after the match."
Do you know what this is about?
I'm going to guess he headbutted somebody and got a red card.
It was in the Wolves game. He came on against... I think we talked about this. He came on against Wolves in the West Mids derby.
Yep.
I was worried because I've seen the reports and he's been doing well. He got himself sent off pretty quickly.
He did. Even worse is that he kicked an advertising board on his way to the locker room and injured his foot. So he's got a ban for violent conduct and then an injury on top.
Being a young player is... These are the moments, right? This is one of the moments that Christian Pulisic hasn't had.
Yeah.
Jack Storer has had it.
And let's hope he continues to not have that moment.
No kicking advertising board in Pulisic, just soccer balls.
Indeed.
If you would like to join the Total Soccer Show Scouting Network, where do you go to do that, Taylor Rockwell?
TotalSoccerShow.com/subscribe?
Correct. It is. TotalSoccerShow.com/subscribe. We will put a link in the show notes to that. Yes, I did the Dutch version.
Yeah, well, no, it's mostly because yesterday I spent like a good 10 minutes scrolling through and looking at all of our different slash pages for different reasons. So it took me a minute to be like, wait, I've looked at them all recently. Which one was it? So I got it right. I'm good. Okay, cool.
So when you sign up, you support the show, you help us keep making the Total Soccer Show. The dream of us doing this full time as our only job gets an inch closer to reality every time someone subscribes. So thank you to everyone who has done so far.
And Jack, hopefully your foot gets better soon. I assume he listens.
Taylor Rockwell, thank you for taking the time to talk to me about soccer all week this week.
Right back at you, buddy.
And listeners, thank you for taking the time to listen. We'll talk to you again after the weekend.